countries who are impacted by drought, where we heard our speaker talking about up to 10% decrease in the GDP, significant suffering to community hit by drought. But you have to realize that actually it's a global impact, but because when drought hit one place, food prices increase globally in other places. So although the drought-hitting communities get the blunt of the impact and their life fabric is compromised, they have to flee their homes and other things. However, it's a global impact, and that's why it needs a global response. We talk about now, we had a session on the impact of land degradation and drought on migration. And we heard about the tens of millions of people who have to migrate. As a matter of fact, we have in 2022, around 32 million people has to migrate. 98% is due to drought and flood, weather-related phenomena. So really, its impact in food security is significant, on water security, in the social well-being of many communities, on food security globally. It is expanding, and we have to have a response. Here, in our presidency here in Riyadh, we put it a priority. Drought resilience is a priority, and we, as we talk now, all the delegates are discussing, and I'm not saying negotiating, as was mentioned by the Excellency the Minister. We are discussing how we can come up with outcomes that meet the global challenges of drought. And this is a very important work that they are doing. But we in Saudi Arabia, working with the UNCD Secretariat and many other organizations, we do understand drought, and we do understand its severity. And that's why we announced the Riyadh Global Drought Resilience Partnership, which really focus on shifting from drought response in a reactive way after it hits to a proactive way in the form of resilience and preparedness. And as study says, every dollar put in resilience and preparedness saves us $5 to $10 from response. So resilience is a more comprehensive approach, from the early warning system to training, education, and capacity building to drought-impacted communities. And we hear the statistics saying that 80% of the drought impact hit farmer communities and the farmers. And we rely on those farmers. We said that 95% of our food comes from land and 99% of our calories come from land. But out of those 95% of food that's come from land, 72% comes from the almost 1 billion farmers who have small farms. And when they are hit in Sahel, in South America, in some part of the Middle East, in Asia, we are not immune in our urban areas. We are also impacted. Although we need to respond to address that there in the communities that are hit, but we also have to realize we are not immune. So by helping them, we are helping ourselves as well. And again, and I think there are solutions, as Mr. Thiaw, the Executive Director of the NCD mentioned. There are ways to be drought resilience. We talked about the early warning system that Dr. Ayman Ghulam talked about. We are launching an initiative, and there are other entities. But it's important that we have the training, capacity building. CGIAR talking about how they develop drought-resilient crops. But we have to bring this to the farmers up front before drought hits. We need the water infrastructure to be drought resilience. You need insurance solutions for small farmers so that they can really ease the impact of drought. So really there are ways to address drought, but we need to put the umbrella for it. And we took it as the presidency a priority through Riyadh Global Drought Resilience, where we want to really basically synergize the global efforts, maximize the partnership with those who provide the support, whether technical, financial, or otherwise, and who receive it. How can the NGO in the drought-stricken region be part of the solution and really partner with the advanced early warning system so they get the information, they go to the farmer and give them the information timely in the way they need it and stick with it with the training and the capacity building that is needed? How can we have the national organization develop a comprehensive drought resilience plans and integrate it into their national plans? So there are ways. It needs determination, it needs integration, it needs developing the synergies, and this is what Riyadh Global Drought Resilience is all about. We are very proud to launch it last week and during this COP, and we are very proud of the members that already joined us, and we are calling upon all the countries and the organization and the private sector and the NGOs to join us in this effort to really enhance our drought resilience. We are targeting the 80 most vulnerable countries to drought. And those are the most vulnerable. 85% of the drought impacts are hitting the 80 lowest income countries in the world. So really, we need to take an action, and the time to act is now. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Osama. Next, please, to give our keynote address, please welcome Dr. Valerie Hickey, the Global Environment Director for the World Bank. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, Dr. Osama, friends. Many of us here today have been on the COP train. This is our third COP. We began together just over 6 weeks ago in Cali, Colombia. We went from there to Baku, Azerbaijan, and we're here. And the truth is, though there's fewer of us here in Riyadh, this is the most important COP. Because it is drought, desertification, deforestation, and land degradation that are the expression of climate change and nature loss. These are the things that cause what Dr. Osama rightly said is significant suffering. It is not climate change as an abstract concept that causes the kind of harm that Hindu talked about in the last panel. It is drought, it is desertification, deforestation, and land degradation. We all know the numbers. We know that 30% of land globally on average is degraded, much more in the least developed countries whose agricultural economies are most dependent on productive land. We know in countries like Rwanda, a country where half of the population is extremely poor, because of land degradation, they're losing 25 tons of topsoil per hectare per year. That means every single family in Rwanda is having a harder time putting food on the table. So that's why when we talk about drought, desertification, deforestation, and land degradation, we shouldn't just talk about these as if they're environmental crises. They're much more than that. These are economic crises. These are humanitarian crises. It's a crisis of families. It's mostly the reason why 800 million people are going to go to bed hungry tonight. Just think about Ghana, for example. In 2017, our models show that they lost an equivalent of almost 3% of their GDP to land degradation and desertification. That's GDP that otherwise could have been spent on education and health and putting food on the table. And the problem is, it's not just a past problem. Our models also tell us that globally since 1995, the world has lost 20% of its natural capital per capita. That means that drought and desertification are not just a problem today, they're going to be a problem long into the future. And that's why we spend so much time talking about resilience and why we're so grateful for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to add a day on resilience here at the COP. When I was in school, we were taught to always start a speech with a definition of what you're talking about. So one of the definitions of resilience is the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging experiences through flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. Ugh, like all definitions, that's incredibly antiseptic. What we mean, of course, it's what you heard from Ibrahim when he talked about the example of Fatuma from Kenya, is that it's at its very worst when we talk about resilience, we're talking about it's people managing to survive terrible things. At its very best, all we mean by resilience is somehow celebrating the persistence and courage of people in the face of Mother Nature at her worst. But it's not enough. We have to have more ambition than simply helping families to rebound back to where they were, because honestly, where they were wasn't a particularly good place to begin with. So resilience just isn't enough. We need a growth agenda. We need to help families, yes, secure their natural capital assets, secure their soils and their livestock and their crops. But what we really need to do then is help them transform those assets into food, into jobs, into GDP. We need to move away from just talking about resilience to talking about restoration, because that's the path to growth. And the good news is we can. We're going to hear today where it's already happening. In the Sahel, for example, where so often we talk about it, a place where things are going wrong, things have also gone really right. The Great Green Wall has restored 18 million hectares of desertified land, and in doing so created 340,000 jobs. Just in one province in China alone, in the Ningxia province, by restoring 126,000 hectares, they've built a winery industry, creating over 40,000 jobs. So there are paths to show that restoration is more than just about resilience. It's more than about building back. It's about growth. It's about a future that is good for the economy and for the environment. That's why countries are desperate to know how to move beyond resilience towards restoration. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, where 3 out of 4 people who live in rural areas are extremely poor, they want to know that as they work to meet their commitment to restore 8 million hectares of forests, they do it in a way where they can also use those forests to build market share in the almost $1 trillion global wood products market. It's not just about restoration for the environment, it's about growing trees for jobs as well. Uzbekistan wants to understand how can they engineer their land restoration to reduce dust storms and the public health emergency that those have caused. In countries like Brazil and Colombia, they're trying to build and catalyze bioeconomies through restoration and understand how do you attract private investment in those bioeconomies so that it's not always about government cost, but private sector investment. The 20th century was all about grow now, clean up later. The last 20 years, I think we've learned that in this century, if we clean up now, if we restore, we can grow faster and we can make that growth stick. Restoration is not just resilience in action. More importantly, it can be growth in action too. Thank you very much.
Dr. Valerie Hickey, thank you very much indeed. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to hand the session over to our designated moderator. I tell you what, cops, you need flat shoes, don't you? There's a lot of walking to be done. And just to pick up on a point that Valerie said about resilience, that definition, I don't know about you, but to me that sounded like the essence of a woman. Okay, so I'd like to, absolutely. So let me introduce your moderator, please. Paola Agostini is the lead natural resources management specialist for Western Africa for the World Bank. She has led numerous programs and projects in Eastern and Western Africa, as well as Central Asia, helping to reverse land degradation and also increase resilience of people, of ecosystems, and of infrastructures. Ladies and gentlemen, your moderator for session 2 is Paola Agostini. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, good morning to everyone, and again, welcome to this very important session. And my name is Paola Agostini. I'm a lead natural resource economist at the World Bank. I've been at the World Bank working on these issues, as she was mentioning, for more than 25 years, always looking at the interface between environment and agriculture, resilience, climate adaptations. So this session is really very, very dear to my heart. And I'm very happy that we had this very important introductory remarks talking about droughts, like Dr. Osama mentioned to us, and all the work that Saudi Arabia is leading in that sense, but also what Valerie mentioned, Dr. Valerie Hickey mentioned in terms of more than resilience, we need to talk about restoration, because restoration is growth. So with that, let me invite the panelists to the podium so that we are going to talk about restoration, growth, jobs, and what we can do to combat droughts and desertification. So first of all, it's my honor to invite His Excellency Maizamas Abdoulaye, Minister of Water, Sanitation and Environment of Niger, to the podium. Please, Minister, if you can come and sit there. Second, let me invite Dr. Mustafa Aki Aidogdu, Advisor, General Director of Combating Desertification and Erosion of the Ministry of Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change of Turkey. Please welcome. Let me also invite Mr. Madou Diallo, National Coordinator of the Project of Restoration of Degraded Lands from Mali. Mr. Diallo. Then let me invite Dr. Touba Houine, Team Leader, Climate Action and Resilience of World Vision, to the podium. And then our dear friends, Stuart McGuinness, Deputy Director of IUCN, again to the podium. We have been sharing many years of work together in these fields. Let me tell you a little bit how the session will run. I will ask a question to each of the panelists, and the panelists, we have about 3 to 5 minutes to answer, and then we'll go through a second round of questions if we have time, and after that, if there is a little bit more time, we will open it up for some questions from the public. So let me come close to you. So welcome again to the podium. And let me start with His Excellency Dr. Maïsama Abdoulaye, Minister of Environment, Water, Sanitation of Niger. So, His Excellency, Niger is a country very badly impacted by land degradation and desertification. What is Niger doing to restore degraded lands and restore ecosystems? And what are the biggest challenges to go to scale?
Voilà. Merci.
Thank you. Allow me, please. Before answering your question, to felicitate the Saudi Arabia and the Secretary of the United Nations in this COP16. And I would like also to thank the organizers of this panel to talk about the intensification of land restorations, and this is a very important topic for our my country. We have 3.4 millions of hectares affected by the land degradation, and we estimate that this rhythm of degradation that will affect more than 5% per year. So this for this land degradation, the Niger is engaged to the restoration of the lands and the water towards 2030 to restore 3.4 million of hectares. And we wanted to be in three major initiatives. So the initiative of the Great Green Wall and the declarations of the neutrality of the degradation of the lands. I have to precise also at this stage for the National Council of our country, the restoration of the land has a priority, and on this title, when we talk about the program of resilience of communities for the safeguarding of the nation, that was specified for the development of the economical sovereignty of our country. At this level, it's about the management, sustainable management of the lands. This is our challenges and actions. That's why the Niger is waiting for the international community, not only that, but also the efforts at the local level and sub-regional also. When we know today that the Niger is engaged in this dynamic of sovereignty with links with other countries like the Mali and Burkina Faso in this configuration of the states of the Sahel. This is what I wanted to give you elements of challenges and expectations. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Minister. It's wonderful to hear the efforts of the Niger for the restoration of the... It's a model for the Sahel and for all the countries in the world. And it's impressive for the change that we could see in the lands. And we can see that it's more green because you have a lot of efforts through the programs of the Great Green Wall and all the national efforts, and also at the regional level. We will continue and to know more things in details, and congratulations for all these efforts.
To Dr. Mustafa Aki Aigodu, Advisor General of the Directorate of Combating Desertification and Erosion of the Ministry of Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change of Turkey. So, Dr. Aigodu, it is in Turkey that the concept of land degradation neutrality was endorsed as a pivotal framework for implementing the United Nations Convention of Desertification in 2015. So the question is, how is Turkey progressing with this particular issues of land degradation neutrality and target 2 of the Global Biodiversity Framework? And in particular, I know you're doing a lot of work on wildfire. So how are wildfire management, how is that integrated into these issues of land degradation? Because that's a sort of a new thing, if you want, in the work we are doing on land degradation. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Chair, distinguished ministers, dear panelists and participants. First and foremost, I thank you for the opportunity to welcome us in such a fantastic environment as an hosting country to Saudi Arabia and event planners. Well, let us recap. In 2015 was the turning point for GLOBE since UN members adopted the SDGs to eradicate poverty and hunger, preserve human rights and dignity, and safeguard for the planet for degradation. And the UNCCD is the custodian agency for the SDG 15 land target achievement and land degradation neutral world. In the same year, as you remember, COP12 was held in Ankara, Turkey, with a specific decision and request issued to parties to voluntarily define their national LDN targets. During the process, Turkey provided considerable technical support to UNCCD as a pilot country for the initial LDN, as well as the financial support through the Ankara initiatives to assist countries in defining their voluntary LDN targets and participated countries. In LDN targets of Turkey, we identified negative trends, notably in forest areas, and set to implement solutions through restoration, pest control, and fire management. Here's what I can tell you about how we incorporate forest fire management. Climate change and drought have increased its frequency in Turkey and left the most severe forest fires in recent years, especially in 2021. It has had a substantial environmental, economic, and public health impact on almost all living things and for all the sectors. A three-phase approach is employed in mitigation of forest fires. The first one was national initiatives for information dissemination, education, and awareness regarding forest fires are implemented. Furthermore, over 100,000 individuals have enrolled as volunteers and get trained to combat forest fires. The second phase of the fire represents the moment of burning. Fires identified by watchtowers, monitoring and decision support system during the fire season are addressed by land vehicles, helicopters, aircraft, and around 25,000 public employees and volunteers as needed. The final phase involves post-fire afforestation and rehabilitation efforts. Afforestation, restoration, and rehabilitation initiatives are conducted with local community involvement under the guidance of relevant organizations. Post-fire management is a critical factor in protecting soil and mitigating desertification. Besides, adverse trends are also apparent in the land classifications, including agricultural and grazing land. Consequently, to facilitate effective national cooperation, in our ministry launched the 2030 Vision and National Action Plan for combating desertification on December 3rd, means just 1 week ago in Riyadh, based on proactive approach. The plan has 5 pillars: strategy and policy development, sustainable land management, cooperation at national and international level, research development, and socioeconomic efforts. The National Action Plan will provide a solid foundation to any actions to combat desertification and land degradation. And the newly launched Turkey Climate Resilient Forest Projects, which is supported by the World Bank, will assist Turkish government to improve forest fire management capacity and strengthen the resilience forest to the forest fires and growing risks of climate change in 14 provinces of Turkey out 81. These provinces are home to around 20 million people, and many of them rely on forest and land resources for a living. The fact that some of these provinces are also damaged by the earthquake last year that highlights the project's value in terms of resilience. This project will help reduce the country's vulnerability and to climate change by relying on comprehensive and cutting-edge integrated fire management approach, including resilient restoration of degraded landscapes. More importantly, again, the project will protect natural resources, including land, and to promote the well-being and livelihoods of the residents, including those living in the devastated by earthquakes last year. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Dr. Aydoglu. I think that the example of Turkey with integrating forest fire management into land degradation and efforts is extremely important, because we don't see that in many countries. And I know that in Europe and Central Asia, but all over the world, I mean, forest fire are increasing, and they are major threats to agricultural land, to human capital, to people, to build capital. And so it's extremely important to do this integrated approach that you described, and really looking also at post-fire, how we can do the restoration. So thank you very much for sharing this important example. Let me now move to Mali, to the Sahel. So Dr. Madou Diallo, National Coordinator of the Project of Restoration of Degraded Lands in Mali. So Mali has actually a lot of experience as well in landscape restoration, but particularly since 2024, Mali has been implementing the landscape restoration projects. And in what we can see in these projects, we are really trying to bring together resilience of communities while consolidating peace and social cohesion. So how is this really happening in Mali?
Bonjour. Hello, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, dear panelists. It's an honor for me to take the mic for the Minister of the Environment and Sustainable Development of Mali, Madam Dumia Mariam Tangara. Allow me to start by thanking all the delegation of Mali that's present here today, and to express my deep gratitude to Madam Paula. Thanks to her, and thanks to the World Bank for this initiative, precious initiative, which we're working on, which has a crucial and important urgency, restoring degraded land and building resilience for the population. In the Sahel region, inaction in terms of development, in facing up to climate change, has a risk of 2 million people, puts the lives at risk at 2 million people because of the places they're living in being vulnerable in terms of drought. In Mali, this situation is extremely concerning. 90% of wood for energy needs is being cut down in the forests each year. My country, Mali, is losing 500,000 hectares of forest. So, even though 10,000 hectares are being replanted, is creating a huge imbalance. In the last 4 decades, the forest area of Mali has suddenly jumped down to 32 million to 17.4 million hectares. That's a huge drop from 32 to 17 million, which has given us huge negative impacts on biodiversity and on hydrogeological impact, negative impact, and a climate change negative impact. This is a cost equivalent to 32.1% of the annual GDP, which is leading towards increased poverty and blocking development in our country. This situation is very serious, and it's making it necessary for urgent action. Regarding this concern, the government of Mali, with the technical support and financial support of the World Bank, has launched restoration projects of degraded lands. These projects were designed in only a few weeks, very quickly, with the help and technical support of the World Bank. Let me please thank Mr. Taufik Benouna, and the technical services were represented at the highest level of the forestry organizations and the Agency for Sustainable Development. The Great Green Wall Initiative was represented. All the large UN organizations for the environment were represented in working with us in this project. So we didn't use new big research. We used existing knowledge to launch these projects. And the framework of this project ties in with the vision of His Excellency Army General Assimi Goïta, President of the climate change transition, head of the state. And he realized that quick action needs to be integrated in all the actions of the country. We had $150 million of funding. In 10 months of working in these projects, we received satisfactory results in these projects. So I must inform Madam Valerie, who talked about creation of a plan for the future. We launched a call to candidacy for community initiatives in terms of restoring landscapes. In 45 days, we registered 1,026 requests, but we've only got enough funding for 100 projects. So this only covers 2% of our needs, the amount of funding we have. So with a bit of help of bank, we kept 118 of the projects, including those which are integrated in the Great Green Wall Initiative. So this project forms less than 10,000 hectares of land, of degraded land we're going to restore. These 118 initiatives will benefit 142,000 people, of which 50% are women, and 7 billion of the 14 billion that has been put forward has created more than 100,000 new jobs directly. That's a huge job creation. And the priority of these new jobs created are for the youth. And it helps women to escape from famine, jihadism, and terrorism. In terms of perspective, I was reading before yesterday a publication of the magazine newspaper called Jeune Afrique, Young African People. Mali has paid a heavy price, and we turn towards a good direction, and we're working in a good way. In the near future, we're going to restore 400,000 hectares of land, if God is willing. 400,000 hectares is a huge positive effect. So today we've got, in the middle, we're asking for the funds that we need to get the financial needs we need to create these projects and work on these projects. And we've launched for calls to action, such as integrating the communities. We've got 21 requests for work in the field on such projects. The population are really suffering. They have huge needs. There are so many projects that need to be worked on. We're trying to work on 110 different projects to improve the resilience of the local populations. We're working hard on such projects and initiatives. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Mr. Diallo. Thanks for having discussed for representing the minister. Also, for putting the question, bringing to the fore the question of how we can work for restoration of landscapes while maintaining employment for youth and for women. And this is hugely productive for economic growth. I think it's amazing what Mali is doing, and it's also shown great results.
Wynne, team leader of climate action and resilience at World Vision. Dr. Wynne, World Vision is widely known as a humanitarian and development organization. But the work of Tony Rinaldo on farmer-managed natural regeneration knows no border, is known everywhere. So I would like to hear from you and see if you can share with us the work that World Vision is doing in many countries in restoring ecosystem and implementing natural-based solutions. Over to you.
Thanks, Paula. Thanks to our women colleagues for hosting this event and having us in the panel with our distinguished guests. I'm glad to see so many of you in the room, considering that this is our second day of the second week. So appreciate the energy, the collective wisdom in the room as well. Now, we heard just in the section 1 from Mr. Ibrahim mentioning about FMNR. Farmer-managed natural regenerations. And we also have His Excellency Minister of Water, Sanitation and Environment from Niger. This is the country of, I would say, the cradle for FMNR, and where you scale up FMNR in institutionalize FMNR through the presidential decree in 2020, and congratulations with the goal to restore 3.2 million hectares in FMNR. So at World Vision, we use FMNR as our technical approach, but of course, as we heard, no one technical approach is going to work. And the way we look at resilience is building foundational assets. And these are natural assets, as we heard, land, water. We build social assets, social cohesions, as we talked about. We build human assets, and of course, financial assets. And all of these are layers on top of FMNR, and we managed to scale up 18 million hectares across 26 countries. And a lot of us will be, oh, that's in Africa. Come and visit the Pacific. We have mangrove restoration in the Pacific, in the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Timor, where we're active working with local communities. Then another example, I think you did mention nature-based solution. So let's go to Ethiopia. This mountain called Humbo, which is 380 kilometers southwest of Addis Ababa. This is thank you again to our World Bank colleagues for supporting us. Being along this journey was for almost 20 years. The 7 poorest communities who used to live on external aid, food aids, now managed to restore almost 2,800 hectares of land And by the end of this project, we'll generate over 800,000 of carbon credits. I'm talking gold standard. Now, where's the money? It's $1 million that's been channeled back to 7 cooperatives in these 7 communities, and the money's been used to do sustainable development plans. And also, Stuart, you would like to hear that says benefits, ecological benefits as well, and groundwater recharge, the landscape is being restored, as well as I hear stories from a young girl talking about the ability to have a shower near home, which is something we take for granted. I moved from Vietnam to Australia, where we were told you only have a shower for less than 3 minutes. And I'm already like, wow, I appreciate the limitation. And now when you move to Africa, and you hear young girls saying, I can have a shower at home now due to FMNR work in our communities, I think that's something that I take it very close to my heart. Okay, now let's talk about scaling. We talk about a lot about scaling here, and scaling are essential to our work at World Vision. We're supercharging our effort in restoring 1 billion hectares together with all of you globally, and also serving 1 billion children. And how can we do that? We scale up in 3 dimensions. Scaling up, as we often talk about, and we have an example from Niger, where you scale up in the governance systems. We revive local governance systems through FMNR. Scaling out, we already present in 100 countries in the world, and 40 out of the 60 most fragile states, we are there. We have 800 staff in Afghanistan. And so now, another dimension of scale is scaling deep, which is what Valerie was talking about, the transformation. How can we scale deep? Scaling deep is not bouncing back after crisis. Scaling deep is changing our mindset, our behavior, and growth should be a part of this mindset. And that's what we do. We scale up restorations with it and have it deeply embedded in our cultural and social norms. And so I won't end my intervention here by, we would like to applaud the World Bank for your report on people in changing climate, launched in Baku, and that's people-centered solutions. It's very much aligned with what World Vision is doing for the past 75 years. We work along the most vulnerable communities, and let's restore to heal not only ecosystems, but also uplift lives and hope from communities we work with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Uyun. You brought some very important elements to this panel. First of all, you know, this farm and managed natural regeneration, which is a kind of complicated name, saying that this is really at the base of many assets, not only the natural capital, but also the human capital, the financial capital, because through that you really build all the different capitals that are part of a society, of a human being. Giving us an example on carbon credits, and then this final part really saying that we need to scale up, scale out, scale deep, and really trying to change the behavior of people and change their life. I think it's a fantastic homework that you give to all of us in trying to continue this work that we are doing. Thank you so much. So right now, let me go to Stuart McGuinness, Deputy Director of IUCN. Okay, Stuart, we go back many years. I remember when we started talking about the bond challenge, and IUCN was really at the core of all this effort on the bond challenge, which is at the origin of everything related to restoration. So can you share with us a little bit about where we stand with the bond challenge implementation and what is next on the horizon?
Thanks very much. Thanks, Paula. It's good to be connected again. Maybe to just answer your question, I think it's maybe worthwhile just a very quick reflection on why I think the Bond Challenge was important. In fact, not only the Bond Challenge, but the whole framework of forest landscape restoration was important at its time. And those of you who have been working for a while, if you go back 25 years, you'll remember actually the issues around restoration they were contentious. It was usually framed in terms of planted forests, often intensively managed planted forests. There was not the profile around issues of agroforestry, including agroforestry techniques like FMNR. There was a lot of focus, important focus, on protection of forests and the sustainable management of working forests. And I think, to me, then, this is sort of the Bond Challenge, and in fact, I'll go back. Forest landscape restoration was important in trying to drive a new paradigm, and critical to that was the insertion of that word landscape. Really starting to try and take a much more holistic, a much more integrated, to use a topical word at the minute, a much more synergistic approach to how we deal with issues, and not to try and separate out biodiversity here, livelihoods here, climate here, to start to try and build that from that level. I think the Bond Challenge then, we started to build momentum around the importance of taking a landscape approach to restoring the functionality of forest and forest ecosystems. The Bond Challenge emerged. There were several major spin-offs, including, I'd say, notably the AFR 100, but also 20 by 20 in Latin America. I think the other thing that was important with the Bond Challenge, it was the precursor to a lot of our thinking around nature-based solutions as well. That it flowed from there. And indeed, the initial idea of the UN Decade on ecosystem restoration came from a Bond Challenge meeting in Central America, and was championed by the then Minister Lena Powell for El Salvador. So, in many ways, I think, from one perspective, the Bond Challenge has served its purpose, and I prefer not to talk about the Bond Challenge per se. I think we must not be territorial now. The challenge is too big. We've heard from Mr. Diallo, fantastic work being done, but we're still far away from actually getting even a balance. We have to. So I do think, I'd say this from an international organisation perspective, we must not be territorial and push one thing or the other. The key issue we need to keep thinking about is the livelihoods of people on the ground and how that can actually be supported. And I think Valerie gave a very eloquent and heartfelt introduction to why that is important. There are lots of other things that are now coming there. There is, I think, critically, we've got Target 2, which expands under the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which expands the idea of ecosystem restoration and that more holistic approach to all ecosystems. We have, in saying that, we have made good progress with the Bond Challenge. By 2020, we surpassed the initial target of 150 million hectares. There was I think there was something around 180. Currently, the target is 350 million hectares by 2030, and there's I think there's about 250 under commitments. But again, I think that's good. But I think what we really need to do is we need to be gelling around. I must say, I'm really inspired. I want to say, I'm so inspired by this COP. And I've been on the COP trail, so that's a real compliment. I think, and actually, and also a real congratulations to the leadership for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for helping to raise the profile. I do think we are now focusing on land degradation as being just as important a global crisis as climate change, even though it hasn't got the attention yet. But hopefully, with all the efforts of the people in this room, we can do that. So my feeling is actually, I think the Bond Challenge has served as a good foundation. We will continue to work with our partners and moving that forward, but it's got to be under the context now of supporting land degradation neutrality. We've all the voluntary commitments for land degradation neutrality add up to 150 or 1.5 billion hectares. So there's a much bigger challenge. We know we're not winning the battle yet. We need to align together. We need to pull our efforts together. And I think that, and critically, I do think the real opportunities for synergies do lie at national and subnational level, and that's again an opportunity for us to pull together. So I think there's been good work done. I'm less keen to talk about the bond challenge per se, and I'm more keen to talk about the real challenge that's facing all of us now, which is we have got to tackle this major global crisis of land degradation neutrality. I absolutely agree with Valerie said. That is feeding several of these other global crises as well. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stuart, first of all, for giving us a little bit of a historic perspective, how we're moving from the bond challenge, which was at the very beginning even just focused on restoration, and there was a lot of debate around, what is allowed to restore this land, and then in bringing in the concept of landscape, which embraces so many more of all the objectives that we have, and now bringing all this to scale through land degradation neutrality and really trying to solve the land degradation crisis that is so much affecting the economic growth and the livelihood of the people. So let's try to continue in this journey, and I agree with you, thanks to Saudi Arabia for really raising the profile of these issues. So we finished the first round of questions. I would like to go through the second round, but I will give you only 3 minutes, so you need to be very disciplined, because I would like also to hear from the audience. So start preparing some questions for the panel. And so let me be very, very, very fast. So let me go back to His Excellency, the Minister of Water, Sanitation and Environment of Niger, His Excellency Abdoulaye. So the question for you is around water in Niger. So it's a huge challenge for Niger, and it's essential for agriculture production and food security. So how can landscape restoration help in dealing with the nexus between soil and water? And do you think this can be a way to help to build jobs in your country?
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Madam, for the question. Particularly after everything that we've had to do, I was saying thanks a lot, Madam. After this first meeting, this first effort, we had an effort in terms of reference. The big issues that we're facing up to, I have to tell you that to come to the question that you asked me about, this concern, the High Authority of Nigeria, the government, what they've been working on, they've created a governance in this sector, in all the sectors, particularly in our sector. Notably, the governance efforts were in a first-line effort to elaborate a program of restoration and preservation of productive bases with a complete mapping of degraded soils and analysis of productions, pastoral productions and pasture land and farming land. The second point is how to accelerate the implementation of the Great Green Wall. No need to remember that the implementation of this initiative, the Great Green Wall Initiative, taking all the initiatives bringing all the different initiatives together, is very important to work collectively according to the local initiatives in terms of promoting agroforestry and natural regeneration to battle against the phenomenon of desertification, to combat desertification. The fourth point was about providing water to villages and making sure water is available through irrigation. We must say that, I must say that, to materialize, to improve this governance in this aspect, we must validate all these actions and work on all these actions. So to restore lands at this level, the targets that we fixed, 240,000 hectares per year. We're dividing up in a proper way. It's not only about restoring pastoral and forest degraded land, but also water land and aquatic land, and we must help with other types of natural land that need restoration. In terms of, we're also, don't forget, we're a country that we have livestock farming. We have extensive livestock farming. Don't forget that. So we can't succeed with restoring on the biological aspect in terms of planting. That's not the only thing that needs to be done in terms of facing up to the climate change challenge. To have assisted natural regeneration, that would allow us to have more. This would allow us to have better results. By combining all these actions of land restoration, this would enable us to get good conditions and the correct conditions, not only for conservation of things that have been damaged in the environment, but to facilitate, improve water filtering, to recharge the water systems in a better way, such as the rivers and the streams. This would provide millions of cubic meters of water in the soils, much needed cubic waters of water in the soils, which would improve the irrigation. And in a general way, we must innovate with a program that we're innovating the program called Great Irrigation. Across this project called Great Irrigation, that would enable Niger to increase production, agricultural, pastoral production, and aquatic production. This would be a production base that would work very well and that's been managed very well. To boost the production, that would lead us to developing a certain number of additional values. And that would improve our value chain. That would allow us to improve our production, to achieve a certain transformation. And you would see that women as men will find new jobs, and it's at a good level. And that would be, in some ways, so to speak, a vector of relaunching, a tool to relaunch the promotion of our improvement of our economy. It's that at this level, I must make it clear to you that our country and our sector is counting on the support, efficient and effective support from your partners, naturally the World Bank, in terms of the forest, in terms of the framework, the forest actions in Mali in our context. And to conclude, we can say that the decisions that were taken in Riyadh in this COP16 can be not only support for us, it can also be a collaboration. It can bring together visions, different visions, and our country, visions from our country, and particularly you can learn things from our community in the Sahel. We can all learn from each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. It's excellent for the concept of the Great Green Wall, and it's a dream for everyone. I have here the pins from this initiative since many years, and this is what we want to do from the World Bank to this Great Green Wall. We used to use people. We didn't talk about livelihood and also the restoration of degraded lands. With this, I will pass to Turkey.
Soil erosion. I remember at the World Bank we were talking so much about the Anatolia watershed projects many years ago. It was an example for the entire world. But in general, Turkey has done a lot of work. So would you like to share some of the examples, especially if you have an example of restoration with private sector, combining these two aspects? Over to you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Chair. It's a great question. You know, erosion is one of the primary factors contributing to desertifications. It's mainly summarized the geographical position, topography, and climate change of Turkey accelerate the erosion. And of course, we have to know that human are the main effective factors in such an events. Well, there are many studies, as you mentioned, and I will give, in order to use the time benefitly, some name of the projects implemented by all stakeholders, including public, private sector, and civil society organizations. Well, the National Afforestation and Erosion Control Action Plan, which was implemented until 2012, and resulted in completion over 2 million hectares of afforestation and erosion control activities. And specific action plan to control erosion, and also an action plan for greenbelt afforestation in watershed basins, an action plan for the upper basin flood control for the years of 2013 and 2017, were implemented following the completion of the afforestation and erosion control action plan. The purpose of these plans was to facilitate rehabilitation of millions of hectares altogether and getting participation of the civil societies and all stakeholders to combat such a problem altogether. And also, National Watershed Management Strategy was developed to establish a unified approach for the development of the projects that ensure sustainable and adequate provision of ecological, economical, social benefits and service from the watershed. And last week, as I mentioned in the first part, Turkey's 2030 vision on combating desertification with comprehensive approach to sustainable use of land-based resources, based on proactive approach all together with all the stakeholders, including civil societies and NGOs as well. I do not want to give so many specific details related with the projects. I mean, in terms of number of figures, but I would like to emphasize the integrated watershed management projects that have been conducted with the assistance of international organizations. That is, integrated watershed management projects realized with support of the World Bank. The primary objective of the watershed rehabilitation activities are to enhance social, cultural, and economic well-being of the residents of the watersheds by implementing the requisite technical, cultural, and administrative measures to maintain the equilibrium between soil, water, and vegetation. The projects were developed to enhance institutional capacity, increase the livelihoods of the local communities through income generation activities, capacity development, monitoring and evaluation, and rehabilitate degraded natural lands. And we also implement erosion control measures. We create a dynamic erosion model and monitoring system as a part of the monitoring and evaluation process. And additionally, we implemented decision support systems which employs indicator of soil organic carbon, land cover, land use, and land productivity dynamics from the national monitoring systems, and report them to UNCCD will be facilitated to this, by this system, and will provide decision makers and hotshots. To conclude, it is impossible to combat with such problems by only from the government side. We have to involve the stakeholders, all civil societies, and everything's are together. Thanks to God, we are lucky in terms of the SESBEC in Turkey. Public awareness and the participation of such an organizations are so many in our projects. And we are trying to keep everybody is on the same sides of the events. And we are establishing close cooperation among the relevant organizations to enhance recovered investment. And we also got many valuable investment and funds from private sectors as well for such an problems for combating them. And this is important for us, ecological and socioeconomic development, monitoring, and to better understand where you stand are vital for erosion control activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for giving us the examples of the many of the incredible work that Turkey has done on erosion control in so many years, and especially the concept of watershed management strategy. The planning of the watershed is actually fundamental, and I was discussing even with our colleagues from Niger that they had a very successful project, Kaidia, that was done in many years, that was all based on the watershed management strategy. So thank you very much. Let me now move to Mali. Monsieur Diallo, vous avez déjà dit un peu tous les...
Monsieur Diallo, you talked about all the effects for the employment of women. I would change a little bit the question to know if we can talk about these productive alliances. It is very important for the Mali projects. We talk about Moringa. If you can tell us about how to create employment through those alliances. Thank you, Madame Paula, for this question. In the frame of implementing for the project of sustainable development in the project of forestation and the fishing as well. These projects aim to create alliances in production. To answer this question, we launched for 30 days a call for candidature for all the initiatives, the project, sub-project on the fishing and PNFL. I can tell you that in 1 month, with the project of forestation, with 400 demand to register in this project, and today with the fishing we had more than 900 candidates to register. I would like to thank the World Bank and the technical service for this. When we see the concept of the project, we don't have the resources to finance all those projects. That's why we are obliged to go through selections from the concept or rules of the World Bank. in these productive alliances. Unfortunately, we have sometimes very bad practices. Instead of having activities to generate money, we have frustrations. We have to change our way of working. We will not work as we used to do before. We will product and we will sell even before producing. We will not. We will follow up with the candidates. You have to sell before coming to us. In this sense, we try to develop the production alliances on the forestations and on the plant Moringa. We will put $3 million to create more than 90,000 employment, direct or indirect. And we have this excellent initiative, and I would like to thank this lady for reforestations, plantation of trees of 40,000 hectares with the alliance with a private sector about mastic gums, and we had to plant the 40,000 hectares for mastic gum, and they sold even with the contract. They sold before even producing, and the Mali import more than 400,000 tons of fish. So we have a contract with the big exportators we had this agreement to work. Thank you very much. So we have 168,000 producers in the fish area. Those are the elements that I wanted to give you. Thank you very much, Mr. Diallo, for this concept, innovative concept for this productive alliance. I am somehow a farmer in Colombia, and I do the same errors. We make the production, and we don't know how to sell it. So you have to find the buyers before on the market, and then you produce. This is wonderful. It is very important. Thank you. Now I will the World Vision, Dr.
Now again, so World Vision works a lot with communities, but at the same time you're also deploying and working with private sector. So how is this? How do you work with communities and private sectors in your programs?
Thank you. Back in the day where we did integrated conservation development many years ago, we tried to de-link communities from, protected areas, things like that. And then we had to find a way to let's solve poverty. And at the time, probably income poverty is what we were talking about. Connect farmers with markets. And nowadays, we're dealing with things, multi-dimensional poverty. So it's not only income poverty, right? So at World Vision, I think I already explained how we work with communities. We never leave. So we build trust. And this is not a project-based activity. It's not like a 5-year funded project by a donor and we leave. We have a program, what we call it's a long-term community development programs that we work with communities, building resilience and trust. And we are there. We layer our support on top of that. So back to working with private sectors, what we do is we call it shared value. So we find companies that want to tackle development and environmental problems, working with us, and not only connecting farmers with markets, but building skills and opening opportunities for both parties. And I give an example. I heard from you about Moringa, and I hope to hear more from you. But in Indonesia, Syngenta is a big seedling company, right? and they refuse to go to remote areas where, you know, we have underserved markets. And how can we get companies like that have their you know, access, people can access their services? So what we did is we co-design programs with them. We co-finance activities in building trust between companies and the local communities, coaching these agronomists on how to work with community in finding opportunities. And slowly, people start realizing the quality of high quality seedlings, and they become repeat buyers. Now, not only Syngenta coming to those remote areas, but they send that kind of value chain, that dominoes effects, right? Other company will see that, oh, Syngenta can do it, I can do it too. So they go to those remote areas as well, and that's just one example with a formal economy. But we also have other example in Rwanda, with informal private sector. We're talking about local nurseries. So, and we also do exactly the same thing. So both formal and informal private sector companies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, World Vision, for mentioning the word trust, which is so important, and for reminding us about the work that can, formal and informal, it's always private sector, even if you're working with small farmers and doing nursery. And now let me go back to IUCN, and at this point, let's look at biodiversity. So we talk a lot about land degradation, landscape restoration. How can we include more work on biodiversity in these efforts? And what can be really done? Because sometimes it's a little bit forgotten when we are really doing all these programs on landscape restoration.
Yeah, thanks, Paula. So I'd absolutely agree. To me, it's not a question of, is there impacts on people, and then are there, or there impacts on biodiversity, or biodiversity as well as people. I think, you know, well, we've been talking about synergies here, and while I do think synergies are particularly elusive at the international level, how those can be framed, it is the reality. Synergies, whether negative or positive, are the consequences of decisions taken on the ground at the landscape level. For example, a reduction in productivity on a smallholder's farm is driven by the same phenomena as a reduction on both the above ground and, critically, the below ground biodiversity. I want to have a plug for soil biodiversity, which we really forget sometimes. So these things are actually combined, and I think the very fact is to try and put these as an add-on is it doesn't reflect the reality. Greater for many smallholders, more biodiversity on farm, particularly I would say also soil biodiversity, means that you've got better soil carbon, you've got better water infiltration rates, you've got better productivity. So I think, so then to come to your question, well, how do we do this? And I think one of the things we've got to do is we've got to be able to measure. Sorry, but by the way, I should say that we just did some work, a major piece of work on agriculture and conservation with the University of Minnesota, and we've actually we identified that we could address 43% of the current extinction crisis, the current extinction risk, by a shift to sustainable agriculture that wouldn't impact productivity, wouldn't impact on farm incomes, in fact would actually help contribute to it. So they are there, but if we're going to do that, then we need to measure, and we cannot just rely on proxies. We can't just rely on how much land under X. We've got to start to be able to have measures of biodiversity. The good news is we've got that. We have got the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species has assessed over 167,000 species. We've got millions of data points, and it's not just a way of documenting extinction risk. We are bringing those into applications so that you can actually identify that. One thing, just the final thing I'll just flag up is a piece of work that is underway now, and I'm particularly excited about this, is looking at the risks of ecosystem collapse. takes the same principle, as we call it the red list of ecosystem. We know you mentioned mangroves. We've just done a systematic assessment for mangroves globally. We know that if we don't take action, 50% of mangroves will be at risk of ecosystem collapse by 2050. We're doing the same for corals, which are even more threatened at the minute, and of which 25% of marine life depend on, are associated with coral ecosystems. And we're planning to do that with other key ecosystems like fresh water. It can also be done at a country level. We're just working with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to do that now. South Africa has really integrated the red list of ecosystem into its planning. It's done 3 reassessments, but really starting to, if ecosystems collapse, that has got a real consequence for how we deal with land degradation. So those are the tools I say. So to me, how we do that, you can't do it unless you measure, and we've got to directly measure the attributes of biodiversity, species, and ecosystems. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Stuart, for reminding us about the importance of biodiversity, but particularly of soil and how it needs to be integrated and measured. So let me try. I think we have. I see the other people for the other panel just ready. So I don't think we have time for questions. But I stand up just to make, I'm not going to make a summary, but just a couple of highlights from this session. So first of all, we started with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia really giving us incredible remarks on what they are trying to achieve here at the COPs in relation to the droughts. Then we had our global director from the World Bank, Valerie Hickey, really mentioning the importance of landscape restoration as an engine of growth in countries and getting people out of poverty and giving them jobs. And at that point, really, I think that with the Minister of Environment of Niger, he was really underlying the commitment of governments to this agenda and what can be done really through government programs in countries so difficult as the Sahel. Then we have Turkey that really put the accent on how landscape restoration and wildlife fire management are a phase of the same coin and they need to be tackled at the same time, but also the importance of watershed management planning, because we cannot keep doing things ad hoc here and there. We need to have a plan and implementing. Mr. Diallo from Mali really linked the work of landscape restoration with the agenda of jobs, productive alliance, really trying to look into making this an economic activity at the end, not only for ecosystem, but really to increase the income of the people. Then we had World Vision that gave us phenomenal examples of what FMNR can do in terms of increasing the capital in the different and the assets, the value of the different assets in the many countries where they work and implement this, and how they can do that with trust and working with private sector, informal and formal private sector. And then we moved to IUCN that really gave us whole the historic perspective on how far we came through only looking at reforestation into looking into really what integrated landscape management. And now then we need to do a better effort in integrating even more soil biodiversity and measuring it to make sure that an important element for restoring land is not forgotten. So with that, let me thank you very much, all this distinguished panel, and let me, a big applause. Thank you, and I need to pass the words to the next session. I think to Mr. Valentin Eich, Senior Water and Climate Specialist of the Global Water Partnership, to moderate session 3. Yeah, Ruth, if you can also come up here because you helped us with this session.
Thank you so much. And we will start with the next session in 5 minutes.